what happened on that day. And I think she did a really, really good job of recreating it for people that weren't there or weren't in the community that needed to know what happened on that day. So I hope you all enjoyed it. And thank you for allowing me to be here tonight, Alan and everyone. Um, I can start off by giving you a little background of where we are. Obviously, the perpetrator, the attack occurred in 2018, October 27th, 2018. We did not go to trial until 2023. So imagine that. This guy's in jail and families want some sort of justice, and people were just not sure when and if the trial would ever happen. That's how long it took. But the prosecution team was absolutely a superstar team. It was made up of 10 different attorneys, district attorneys, and they guided the families and everyone who testified in terms of understanding what next steps are. They met with us every single day. It started in April of 2023 with jury selection. The jury selection took, I have a girlfriend who's a judge here in Cook County. I live in the Chicago area. And she said normally she picks her jury in a day or two. This took over 3 weeks because both the defense and the prosecution had so many strikes that they could strike people out in terms of being a juror. But the jury was placed at the beginning of May, and they did everything they could for the families and the survivors. We had a room at the courthouse that we could sit in upstairs if you didn't want to be in the actual courtroom, where you could sit. There were refreshments. There was a big screen so you could see the prosecution and the defense up there. Obviously, we saw the perpetrator every single day. They brought him in. And it wasn't until normally trials have two parts to them. They have a guilt phase and then they have a sentencing or a penalty phase. They decided with this trial, the judge said, we also need an eligibility phase. So they split the sentencing and penalty phase into two phases. So there were actually three phases. And the guilt phase was not something that the defense fought against. They said, we know he's guilty. He was there. You know, it happened on that day. So the jury was really quick to give a quick guilty verdict within a few weeks. Then they had an eligibility phase to determine whether he was eligible. And part of that eligibility was, did he have an intent to kill? So the trial went on for several weeks. We did not get a final verdict until the end of July. So we would come back every week. My husband and I live in Chicago. Most of the people live in Pittsburgh still. There is one family that lives in France, so they traveled in. But it was day after day of sitting in the courtroom and watching everything. And the prosecution team was incredible. They literally, the defense team would bring in all of these specialists in terms of mental health and in terms of physicians that to try to prove that Bowers, who is the perpetrator, was mentally ill, that he suffered from schizophrenia and epilepsy was what they were going for. And every day we sit there and couldn't wait till the prosecution got up there because they literally shot down everything that the defense put up there. Rather than just saying, here's the reports for the doctors, the prosecutors went into the notes of the doctors. So what was in the reports were things like, you know, he shows sign of schizophrenia and this is why. But what were in the notes of the doctors were things like, and these are horrific things, so I hope they don't offend anyone on the line, but they were things like, I got a Jewish dozen because he only shot 11 instead of 12 people. He said, I got several oven dodgers. And we all know what that means in the Jewish religion, in the Holocaust. And so there were so many things in his notes that just in the doctor's notes that were not in the actual reports that were presented in the courtroom that the prosecutors got at. And his presence on the dark web was significant, really significant. So the trial went on for, like I said, 3 months, and finally there was a sentencing and penalty phase. And you have to remember that during the whole trial, the family sat in the courtroom, survivors sat in the courtroom and watched this unfold, and we could not show any emotion. We couldn't, my husband couldn't put his arm around me. We couldn't outwardly cry. You could cry, but you had to like keep it to yourself because they showed pictures, tons of evidence. They had a whole model of the synagogue and where the shooter was and who he shot here and who he shot there. And it was really horrific, but they did a fabulous job, really proving his guilt. But the one thing that I thought was just remarkable is they spent the first 3 days talking about Jewish traditions, Jewish family, going to synagogue, the importance of it. So it was really a beautiful thing. But in the end, Bowers is in jail. He's on death row. They did, honor a guilty verdict, and they sentenced him to death. Until something happens, he will remain on death row. But I would say a majority of the families were really happy about it, happy about the sentencing. At the beginning of the trial, there were a lot of families that did not believe in the death penalty. But as the trial moved on and on, you saw some of the movement of families changing their minds because you can't really make a blanket statement that for or not for the death penalty until you're actually in those shoes. So hopefully that gave you guys a pretty broad stroke of what happened in the trial. And he's just on death row now, and he's seeking appeal. So we meet with our prosecutors once every couple months, just get an update on where the appeal process is.
I think the just remembering back to how even here in the middle of the ocean, 5,000 miles away, we were very affected by it. And one of the things that I recall was recognizing not the people because we knew them, but because we are them, because we could each see ourselves in the roles and the people who were directly affected by this. And I think it's something of a wake up call to synagogues, to congregations everywhere. Is that what you found? You've been traveling around the country. I'd like you to talk a bit about the traveling memorial that you have as well. But do you get a sense that people were sort of awakened to what happened and how it could
Definitely,
happen
Alan.
anywhere?
It was the worst anti-Semitic act ever committed on US soil. I mean, I think people were shocked. I don't know if any of you have ties to the mainland or Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh is a very, pretty much a safe community. Tree of Life has been there for lots and lots of years. My grandfather actually was an educator there for 35 years. My grandmother went to synagogue there, and that's how my two brothers, Cecil and David, which you met in the documentary, they would go every Shabbat with my grandmother. And then when she passed, they would go by themselves. And they're special needs, but every Friday night and Saturday were at the synagogue. It was like their second home. They loved it there. The people welcomed them there. But the day that it happened and then the weeks to follow, I probably at my home got over 500 letters that either came to my house directly because people got my address, which is kind of a scary thing, or they went to my synagogue here in the Chicago suburbs, or they were delivered to Tree of Life with our family's name on it. People from all over the world, not even just Jews, really people of all faiths. I got things like gift cards, and I got letters, and I got cards, and I got memorial donations that people had made in my brother's honor and the other nine victims. So really an outpouring, and Jewish family, Jewish tradition, Jewish people tend to gravitate toward one another. I was in Hawaii a few years ago, my first time. I went to Oahu with a friend and absolutely love it there. Would love to get back at some point. But I feel like you guys have a nice community there as well. But I feel like I don't know how many Jews are in Hawaii or in your particular area, but I feel like you probably tend to gravitate toward those people just because you have similar values and similar culture and traditions. And I live in a very non-Jewish suburb of Chicago, on the west of the city. Um, and there's probably 20 Jewish families in our area, but we do have a synagogue, or a temple, I should say, that we all go to in the western suburbs. And I made a lot of my friends early on when my girls were in grade school, and they went to Sunday school and Hebrew school and got bat mitzvah there. So I think having that special bond, and Pittsburgh really reunited in terms of people from all faiths. The day after everything happened, the head of the Muslim community, as you saw in the film, got up and said, "We're going to pay for all the funerals." And he hadn't raised a cent. I mean, he literally got up there and said that and hadn't raised any money yet. So, and I met Wasi in person, and really just a unique guy. And just people from all walks of life got together and, what can we do for you? I mean, we had so much outpouring. It was just incredible. But what we're doing now is we're rebuilding. And as I said, I don't live in Pittsburgh, but I am on the board of the Tree of Life, the entity. There's the Tree of Life congregation, and then there's the Tree of Life Incorporated, or TOLI as we call it. And we're rebuilding. We just broke ground in March. We will rebuild the synagogue there. We'll also have an educational center. We'll also have a social hall. We'll have a theater as well. And then we'll have, most importantly to me, is the memorial for the victims. And it's going to be a place that teaches about anti-Semitism, and what better place than where it actually happened. So the programming is going to be very unique. Um, we're hoping to partner with interfaith groups. We're hoping to partner with other Jewish organizations. We just did some stuff with Robert Kraft's organization, the Blue Square Alliance. I don't know if any of you are familiar with them. We just did some stuff in Pittsburgh with them for the draft. The football draft was in Pittsburgh. So we're trying to, there's so many Jewish organizations out there, and many of them, their desire is to fight anti-Semitism and hate of all kinds, but this is really our part of our mission statement.
I'd like to open it up if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question. I mean, I have more I could ask, but I think that it's been important for you to hear from the whole group. So please unmute and introduce yourself and say hi.
Hey, that's Craig Silverman, and I enjoyed its documentary. I learned a lot. It touches on a lot of hot button issues, uh, immigration, and the death penalty. I thought Ms. Rosenthal said something pretty darn wise. Uh, I'm from Colorado, and I had occasion to prosecute a death penalty case, and you don't really know how you feel about something like that. I mean, you can spout off, but you don't really know until you're confronted by it in your own life. I guess it may be like abortion where you can talk about it, but until you're pregnant, you might not know how you really feel. So I've wrestled with that. And sadly, with Colorado, and we had Columbine and the Aurora Theater Massacre, and then the Boulder King Supers tragedy with all those people killed. And one lesson that we learned, and I appreciated that the producer of this film also did not identify the shooter. When Columbine happened, the shooters, Klebold and Harris, were on Time magazine and identified. And as we've dealt with these mass shooting incidents, we don't really like to glorify their name because we worry that this may be part of their motivation.
Very, very true. And many of the families don't even speak his name. I speak his name just because he's not really a perpetrator to me. His name is Bowers. He's not, he's an evil man. He doesn't belong in our world, but he is in our world, and we need to deal with people like that. And um, my daughter went to Boulder. She went to CU Boulder, and she was in town at school during the Supers thing, during the supermarket shooting. And of course, trying to get in touch with her was very scary. And when I called her, she said to me, Mom, lightning doesn't strike twice. And I said to her, she's 20, at the time she was 20. And I said, honey, you have no idea. And I think educating the younger population about, and I see a couple of young faces on the Zoom, but educating them about the importance of just being vigilant when you're out there. I go into places now, and the first thing I look for are the exits. And where would I hide if there was a shooter? And a lot of people say, Diane, that's a little anxious. And I'm not an anxious person at all, but I want to be prepared if something should happen, because you can be in the wrong place at the wrong time and it just happens. And lightning does strike twice. There have been incidents where people are in the wrong place at the wrong time in families and multiple shootings. So I just say, you just need to be vigilant.
There was something that Ellen Serloff said about the days of synagogues having the doors open and or not being secure are over.
Yes.
And it's a little it's very tough to accept that. We have a reading that we do at the beginning of our Shabbat service about may the doors of this synagogue be wide enough to welcome all who want to come in, and narrow enough to keep out hatred and several other things that goes on to. And I keep hearing that in my mind, realizing that we do have to be vigilant, and I wonder if you found in talking to different congregations people coming to terms with that, of recognizing we don't want to have arms in the synagogue, or we don't want to have an armed guard outside, but the reality is we have to protect ourselves.
And that truly is the reality, Alan. I mean, at this point in time, I feel comforted by seeing a guard outside there or a police car. Not that they're necessarily going to help. I have a cousin that lives in Arizona and lived in California, and he's Chabad, and I'm Reformed, but he was telling me in his Chabad congregation, they all carry guns. So they're all concealed carry. But the reality is there's so many evil people out there, and I'm not telling you guys anything new. The rhetoric on social media, what's happening at universities, what's happening in Europe, in the United States. I mean, the anti-Semitism is at an all-time high, and it's important that we're vigilant about it. And the thing that really convinced me to be on the Tree of Life board is I really want to be able to educate people. My biggest issue, though, is how do we get the people that are younger, that don't want to be educated about it or feel like they already understand it, when they don't actually have the whole history of what happened in Israel and what happened in Gaza and what's happening in the US and the UK and Amsterdam and all over the world. They just look at social media and they think, Jews are killers. So it's really important that we get to the root of it and educate, because some of the other populations educate their kids at a very young age about hate and hate certain people because of their differences. And we really need to find a way to combat that.
Hi, I'm Marilyn. I
Hello.
really, hi, I really enjoyed the documentary. Hard as it was to watch, it's certainly worthwhile. I wanted to contribute this, and I don't know how really to handle it, because I mean, I was a Red Cross volunteer, a public information officer, and because of that, I had some extensive first responder training, etc. And I know the Red Cross has not been, has had some anti-Semitic trail recently, actually, the last several years, and it goes back to World War II, and I didn't know about that. Having said that, the training on things, emergency training, it could be a fire, it could be a shooter, it could be anything. They cover a lot of ground on what to do in an emergency and how trusting your gut. Like when you walk into a building, you should see where the exits are. There could be a fire. You should look around and see how to protect yourself and your loved ones, or the people that you care about, or your neighbor. So, it's not hyper vigilant. It's a little hyper vigilant, But the world, it calls for that, and too many people figure either nothing will ever happen or somebody else will take care of it. And sometimes people just panic or freeze and they don't know what to do. I was in a situation once several years ago in a movie theater in a very upscale neighborhood in California. We were taking our kids to some movie in the afternoon with their friends that would be family rated. But next door in a different theater, they had some gang kind of movie that was causing havoc. It was a Saturday afternoon, and all of a sudden there was I just had this really bad feeling in my gut. This happened at an amusement park once too. I just felt like something is not right here. Something is wrong. And we left. We had just paid for the tickets, and I made everybody leave. And they were just, of course, yelling at me about how crazy I am. But we left. There were stabbings in that theater that day. And that wasn't the first time that something like that had happened. You really do need to trust your gut, and don't worry if somebody thinks you're crazy, because being crazy is better than being dead.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, my brothers were in that synagogue all the time. I mean, and the unfortunate thing is he prayed on a congregation that was typically older, not a youthful not the faces I'm seeing here, but a lot of people were in their 80s and 90s. And
We flew you because we live in Hawaii. Go
well,
on.
you guys look good. But this congregation, and the sad thing about it, and I think they mentioned it in the film, that there was supposed to be a youth service that week, and it's pretty scary what could have potentially happened then. But I think us as Jews need to be vigilant. I think that we also need to be aware of what's going on social media and be able to tell people when someone says something that's hurtful. We have a neighbor that lives across the street from us. He's a Jordanian Christian, but he was posting some really bad stuff on Instagram, and I follow him on Instagram. And I said to him, I waited a couple months because I wasn't really sure, and I really didn't want to approach him, to be honest with you. I just felt like, what do I say? How's he going to react? And it took close to a year to go to him and say, what you're posting is really hurtful. Whether you believe it or not, I live across the street from you, and you like me and my husband. You have us over for wine and dinner all the time. In the last year, I haven't spoken with you, and this is the reason why. Because they kind of would pass us and wonder why we weren't doing stuff together anymore. So, but he was taken back, and he said, well, I believe other things. And I said, you're entitled to your thoughts, but you need to think about what you're posting and maybe research it first. And he said, did I post something that wasn't correct? And I said, several of your posts, I can go back to them, but you chose to make them as reels, which disappear after a while, rather than posting them on your Instagram where I can see them again and again if I go to your profile. And he said, well, that's because I wasn't sure how to do that. And I said, well, I'd love to see the reels and we can research them together. And he kind of looked at me and said, I don't really think that's necessary. And since then, we see each other in the street. We're not really friends anymore, but we're not nasty to each other.
Right.
But I felt better that I actually said something to him. But it took me a year to do that.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, I hear you. But I'm proud of you that you did it.
Yes.
It's good that you did it. We all have to do it.
Yeah.
I see Craig has his hand up to ask a question, but I also see we've been joined by Michelle, by your sister.
Yay!
So I don't know if she wants to turn on her camera and unmute herself and say hello.
Alan, there was some,
And she's with my dad, who is 94.
Oh, okay. So they're together. He was in. So when the film was done, in fact, that's one thing I wanted, Craig. Before we get to your question, that's one of the things I wanted to ask about. You mentioned Trish Adlesic, who produced and directed the film, and I wonder when she approached you about it. Did you think this was a good idea? I mean, the result is brilliant. And I think it's at the same time it's hard to watch, it's hard to look away, and it's an important combination, I think. But when she approached you, was that something that you felt was going to be helpful?
Very much so. And I'll let Michelle, it looks like my dad may be on too. Are you guys on? It looks like my dad may have jumped off. Michelle, can you talk, Michelle, or can you turn on your camera? Let me see if she texted me here. Okay, I don't have a text from her, but I do see her on there. When Trish approached us, we thought it
Can
was a
you hear
very.
me?
Now I can. Now I can. I
Sorry,
can't.
I'm moving around Dad's apartment. We have both his phones on.
Okay, there's my dad, Ellie Rosenthal, and my sister, Michelle Rosenthal.
Hi, guys. Sorry, God, I'm a mess.
You're fine, Michelle. So they were just asking when Trish approached us to be in the documentary, how did we feel and what were our thoughts? And I'm happy with you answering that, Michelle.
And Dad has this directly in his ear, as you know, Diane. So he's just, I can't even talk to him otherwise. But when she approached us, my only, not only, but a big concern was that she was honest with our story and didn't want to make it what it wasn't. And the most important thing was um, we never want anyone to forget our brothers.
Yeah, it was important that we taught the world about what happened in Pittsburgh and what the response was from the community and who the victims were individually. They were brothers, sisters, parents. They were real people like you all are. And like I said, it can happen anywhere. I'm sorry, do you guys have some more questions?
Yes.
I'd love to. I love that Michelle is on and Diane and Mr. Rosenthal. I thought that the movie was great, but there's no doubt who the main stars were, and that was Cecil and David, a blessed memory. And our condolences to you. And as we talk about synagogue experiences, I come from some big shoals in Colorado with security and all of that. But here in Kona Beth Shalom, which I'm not an expert, but I have been here over a year now. It's a lot like that Shabbat service at Tree of Life, and thank God the junior congregation wasn't meeting that week. But we just have, we're always looking for a million plus, but we don't take anything for granted, and everybody pitches in like Cecil and David did. So even though we're in paradise, we can really relate. I can to that kind of Shabbat service with just a fairly intimate group who are the regulars. They were the regulars, and and they paid a terrible price. And my condolences to you and the family. And again, from my experience, don't expect it to be resolved anytime soon. I see the appeal is not even before the court, some pleadings, but I used to tell the victims in my case, and we got a death verdict too, and he died on death row 18 years later of natural causes. And I said, if you want a case that never, with his last appeal pending before the 10th Circuit, if you want a case that never dies, do a death penalty case and get a death verdict, because it's going to be a decade of waiting for you guys, a decade more. And I'm sure your prosecutors have told you about that.
Yes, very much so. Our biggest concern and why the majority of the families were in favor of the death penalty is we did not want him to be put into the general population at the jail. And you can understand that because he's just going to spew his hate and find other people that have similar outlooks and similar thoughts about how the world should be rid of Jews. And that was, I'd say Michelle and I got really, we attended the trial together, and my dad and my mom were in Florida at the time. So we would regroup with them every afternoon after the trial to give them an update. And That was our main concern, was him being released into the general population. Plus, he gets a lot of freebies when you're in jail. Like his big thing, one of the things he said in to one of the physicians that evaluated him in the physician notes that the prosecutors had brought out during the trial was he'd get 3 square meals in jail. You wouldn't have to worry about it. So there were some things that were said that just stick in our minds.
I
I
don't
don't
know
know
if
if
you,
you,
I
I
don't
don't
know
know
if
if
you
you
shared
shared
this,
this,
Diane,
Diane,
but
but
his
his
only
only regret was
that
that
he
he didn't
killed
kill
more
more
people.
people.
Yeah, I went over the 3 phases of the trial early on, Michelle, before you guys joined. But yeah, I told no, bring up anything you have because there's, obviously there was so much going on during the trial. So
I think Barry has a question.
Hi, I want to thank you for making this happen. The movie was deeply touching, very moving, and it and brought up a lot of emotions. The main thing that it brought up in me was the question of how to change the narrative of anti-Semitism that is out there in the world. And I was happy that you included the vile visit by our president to come there and do awful things just by, his face being there. And he's not the only one, but he enables this hatred to be granted attention by so many people. But it's not a simple political question. So the question that comes up in my mind is, there's been anti-Semitism forever, seemingly. So what can be done for that? And whether there's a lot of anti-Semitism or not in Hawaii is partly of concern. It's not a lot here compared to other places, but it could happen at any time. But I have a secondary, and so that's my primary concern. But here's another question, and I'm not sure if this is appropriate or not. If the members of the Tree of Life community had taken the training that that the movie spoke about hide and run and hide and fight, what might have been different? Would it have saved lives, or was this shooter just so effective that nothing could have changed it?
Michelle, I'll let you go ahead and take that because you look like you're ready.
Uh, this the first question is actually more complicated, so I'll answer your second one first, and that is 2 of the 3 people, and I'm always cautious if you don't want to hear details, mute your Zoom, but 2 of the 3 people that were killed first were a doctor. Actually, one was a doctor, one was a nurse, and the other one was a leader in the congregation. And when they first heard the noise, they thought that a coat rack had fallen over and someone was hurt. So they were responding to that noise. People quickly figured out after and were able to run and hide. The ones that were able, unfortunately, both of my brothers and my dad's sons were not. Cecil was always a greeter, so he was probably looking to greet whoever was coming in and welcoming them. And David, we're a little unclear about, so we just have to, whatever the easiest way for us to process it, or not
And
easy.
Michelle, didn't a couple of the folks, like didn't Rabbi Myers and the
Stephen,
cantor Stephen Weiss dad have training prior?
Yeah, they both had training, and Stephen also had been familiar with guns. He's used guns before for hunting, so he knew when he looked out the doorway of the chapel for the Tree of Life congregation, he saw the shells flying across the tile floor. And that's when he told everyone to run.
But the question in my mind is if more, like we're looking at whether we want to do this training for ourselves or not.
Oh, there's no
There's no
question.
question. You need to
There's
do it.
no question. You don't know what to do in that situation. And the rabbi did what he should have done. He hid. It's just, this was a little confusing, is all I was saying at the beginning. But the training, I mean, we are really close with the FBI agents and the head of security here in Pittsburgh for the Jewish community. And the training makes a huge difference.
It at least prepares you for what potentially could be there and what are the alternatives in your mind that you need to go through when something like that happens. I would strongly suggest you do it as a congregation. It's so important.
And just to answer your first question, it is a long, complicated answer. I agree with you 1,000% that when you have a quote leader of your country who permits hate and not only permits it, but just does so much of it, it's a really hard thing to fight. I get frustrated. My sister knows this. I get very frustrated. So for myself, it's trying to be nicer to people, be better to people. There's so many people out there that have not met Jewish people, as crazy as it sounds, and then just come to assumptions. So I do the best I can with letting people know that Jewish people are good people and they care a lot about others.
And one of the interesting things was the folks that were the jurors, majority of them had never met a Jew. They lived in like rural outside of Pittsburgh. Some of them had to drive an hour and a half each way to get to the courtroom in the morning to serve. So a lot of them were unfamiliar. So like I said, when the prosecutor spent the time to talk about the Jewish traditions, we had an opportunity when we gave our victim impact statement after the verdict was done to meet some of those jurors. And they said, your traditions are beautiful and your families were beautiful. Like there were times during the trial that Michelle and I'd be sitting next to each other and we'd look up and we tried to figure out like which juror was going to do this or do that. And, you know, a couple of them looked like they potentially would let him get off. And like we just tried to like profile them in our minds. But there were times where like men that were jurors were tears were just running down their face.
Heather, I have you on now.
Okay, thank you. I don't really have a question. I just have some comments. My name's Heather. I'm the president of Kona Best Shalom. And I just want to say thank you to Diane and Michelle and Mr. Rosenthal for joining us today. Also, I'm just sending my deepest condolences and may Cecil and David's memory be a blessing.
you.
I was thinking about security, and that's something that's very important to me. Ellen and I have attended the SEN webinars every year before the high holidays. And we put it together a security policy and checklist and have talked to the board about it. And we encourage the board to all take the training every year. So this is just important to my mind. And when I saw that run, hide, fight, I remember that from training. So thank you for that. I don't know if I had anything else to say, but just thank you again.
So much. Thank
Okay.
you.
Jen?
Okay, thank you. And I also would like to just express my deepest caring for all of your family. And, you know, when I think about what sense I got about who your brothers were, I'm gonna bring that with me. And part of what I want to share is recently there was someone in the community who was reaching out a hand in friendship and I don't think he's known other Jews. And so he's asking a lot of questions. And I work for Jewish Community Services, and he's asked me about that. And he's attending some of our speaker series. And recently he told me that he voted for Trump. And without getting to heavy politics, to me, and one of the things I said to him is Trump laughed about accosting and assaulting women. And I've been really struggling with how to really say to this person, I cannot be friends with you because we have really different ethics. And it wasn't anti-Semitism, and yet drawing from my sense of Jewish values and Jewish ethics, any kind of hatred like that, whether it's about women, whether it's about Jews, whether it's about people of color, is wrong. It's not acceptable, and it's not something that I can embrace in friendship. And I've been trying to figure out how to approach that in a way that feels like I have integrity. Like I'm not just like screaming in his face, which part of me wants to do because it just feels so wrong. So I'm going to think about your brothers and that gentleness that you showed to us that they had, that they brought that gentleness to every day of their lives, and bring that to my heart when I have this hard conversation. And
And I think that's the most important thing to do. To me, it doesn't matter if you voted for Trump or you're a supporter of Trump or you're not a supporter of Trump. What we really need to do is to get past that. And I know he is the leader of our country, but we need to just be able to educate the people like you are talking to your friend. And I would not abandon those friendships
Right.
unless they become belligerent about it. Once someone becomes belligerent and you can't talk to them about it, then it's a problem. But I have found that most people and most non-Jews are open to discussion about it. I have a really good friend who's an attorney who's not Jewish, and he is very pro-Israel. I don't know why he is pro-Israel, but he talks about it all the time. And he's a big Trump supporter because he believes some of Trump's policies are good, but he understands what Trump is made of as well. He said, I have to look the other way on certain things. But there were some good things that Trump did. I mean, for Israel. I mean, we need to recognize that at some point. But I say in our everyday lives, like Michelle said, and like you said, you need to take that kindness and that love, and you really need to educate people. And my dad is a perfect example of that. He lives in an assisted living home in Pittsburgh. Obviously, a lot of the staff is not Jewish, and he educates them all the time. Here's Israel, here's the size of it, here's, what happened in 1948. And some of them obviously don't care, but he's gotten a few that actually listen to him and say, "Oh my God, I never realized that." So I think taking the time and understanding the history, I think that's the biggest problem we have out there is people just post rhetoric and repost, but they don't research whether what they posted is even true. I mean, if you watch someone like Noah Tishby, I don't know if you guys follow her,
Mhm.
but I love watching her go to a college campus and saying, what does free Palestine mean to you? Um, and some of the people don't really know, and they don't know
Mhm.
why they're holding a Palestinian flag, and they don't know what it means. So
Yeah.
I think the more education that we can do, the better off we are. Dad, do you have anything to add? He's
Voice,
on he's on mute.
the voice, can you hear me?
Yes.
The voice did not know anything about hate or discrimination about anything, whether it's about Jews or people of color. We were all the same, and they were very loving young men, not knowing the bad things that have been occurring in life. And it just hurts. It's a continued hurt. It's already 8 years that this massacre has occurred. And we just want people to know what peace is about. And these wars that go on, I try to think about it. Who's responsible for all this? The discrimination that comes from the families. And the families have to learn about the history. If they're anti-Semitic, let them read about what the Jews have gone through so many centuries. We've suffered a lot, and all we're asking for is the Jewish homeland. I thank you for letting me say the few words.
Thanks, Dad.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
I
But
wanted to say something briefly to the person who was speaking about getting rid, putting this person out of her life who's not sympathetic or empathetic and doesn't seem to realize. But she may be the only conduit that this person has to a reality that's more, humane and more full of love. And perhaps, instead of just getting rid of him, maybe you could share with him how sad it would make you to not have him around, but that some of his thoughts are so threatening that you have a hard time, living with it, that you needed to share that with him because he's important to you. It sounds like somebody who doesn't have much of that in his life. And maybe you could really, I mean, I know it's hard, difficult people are difficult, but maybe you could be a conduit of that message rather than just discarding him and he goes off and spews hatred wherever he goes because he has nothing else in there, perhaps.
I think it's easy for us to look inward. I know I asked some questions about how the congregation or the different congregations responded and recovered, and if there's a possibility of fully recovering from this. But how about the community in general? I think one of the things that comes out in the film is how much support there was from outside the Jewish community, which was pleasantly surprising because, especially as you mentioned, the leader of the Muslim community and others who you don't necessarily come to mind as the first ones who will step forward to help. But do you think in the 8 years or almost 8 years it's been since this happened that there have been changes in the community and in the community's attitude toward the Jews among us?
Michelle, I'm going to let you answer that because you're actually living in Pittsburgh and I just come in once a month for a week. Can you?
Sorry, repeat that, Diane, because my phone was going crazy. I was both running.
Oh, that's okay. I'll let Alan repeat it.
Well, I was saying that it's easy for us to look inward and say, how does this affect the Jewish community? But it seems like the entire Pittsburgh community was affected. And I wonder if you have a sense of that, if there's been a change or a change in attitude that you can sense about, for instance, the example that was given in one of the comments in the film was about telling your child who was traveling not to wear her Star of David in public, something like that. Oh, I think that was in a New York Times article, Diane, that you relayed. But the idea of being able to not have to hide who we are, is the community more accepting in a way after the coming together that happened in the wake of this?
I would say, without a doubt, that the days and weeks and months to follow, the community was unbelievable. And I know the movie shared a few of those things.
Do you think that has continued?
So I'm pausing because unfortunately, we have the congresswoman for Squirrel Hill, not to get political, but the congresswoman for Squirrel Hill, where this happened, which is our neighborhood and the largest Jewish population in the city of Pittsburgh. She is very, very much aligned with the, for lack of a better description, the far left people in the Democratic Party. And she has not been very supportive of a lot of the causes that relate to Israel. I will say she was supportive in getting funding for the rebuild. So nothing's one way or the other is what I've learned through this whole thing. But the community as a whole has been wonderful. Unfortunately, the next shooting happens and people move on, and that's what's so horrible. And that is what I continue to say, and I think my sister and my dad and I, is we just don't want this to happen to anybody else. This is unimaginable, and everything that comes with it I could have never predicted. life was surreal when we went into the courtroom for the first day, and just to be in the same room. I was trying to figure out ways to solve this myself, but all we can do, and it sounds so simple, but I make such an effort every day to do something kind, to be nice to people, to acknowledge somebody's name if they're wearing a name tag. I can't tell you how many times people have been shocked that I've said their name and asked how they're doing or told them that they had a beautiful smile. It makes a huge difference in someone's life.
And Cecil and David were very much like that. Um, they would um, they would welcome anyone into the synagogue and say, "Oh my God, you look so beautiful. How's your mother? How's your brother?" And people would just giggle because they were just so friendly. So it's important.
Well, I think we've taken so much of your time, and we really appreciate that you were willing to participate. I want to ask one more question because I mentioned it before. I know that you had said that you were traveling. I think you were in Florida with a traveling memorial. Talk a bit about that, and would you bring it to Hawaii?
Oh, very, very good possibility. The Tree of Life right now, until we have a building, until we have programming out there, has developed an exhibit. It's the Tree of Life traveling exhibit, and it has been in 4 or 5 cities. We've been in the Cleveland area, which has a fairly big population of Jewish people. We've been in Pittsburgh, obviously, at the University of Pittsburgh. Cleveland, we were at the Maltz Museum. New York, we were at the National Holocaust Museum. This most recent one is in Florida at a university called Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And it will also be coming to Chicago, and then we hope to get back up to Boston. But if there's a place for it in Hawaii, and if there's a contact, Alan, whether it be you or the president who introduced herself, or someone from your congregation, we can certainly talk and see if that's possible. We have several traveling exhibits. Some are larger. The one that we used at the Holocaust Museum is larger, and it gives people a history of what happened on that day. There's photographs, there's language and text. There's artifacts. What we've done is we got artifacts from all over the world, from every different state. So when we're in a particular state doing the traveling exhibit, we will bring artifacts from that particular state. So when we were down in Fort Lauderdale, there were a lot of Marjorie Stone Douglas students that did artwork, and we brought it back, and it's actually in the exhibit. So what goes around that's good comes around that's good. So that's our hope. So we'd like to get it out there just from an educational purpose. And if you all are interested, Tree of Life Inc., you can go online. It's Remember, Rebuild, Renew is the tagline. Do any of you watch The Pit?
Yeah. And
Okay.
in fact, yes, I wondered about that. It almost sounds frivolous to ask it, but the fact that it came up, I think, first of all, that the character that is played by Noah Wiley, who is the main character, they gave him a name, Rabinovich. And I thought, that is no coincidence.
No.
I believe that was a tribute to Jerry Rabinowitz.
You know what? We all thought that, but his wife confirmed that she didn't believe it was. We all thought that too because it would sound lovely, but I think the Pit's done a really great job of depicting Pittsburgh, and I thought they did an especially good job with that particular scene, with the woman that came in with the burns that talked about the 10/27 attack at her synagogue, which was Tree of Life Synagogue. And I think I was talking to someone about this the other day. I think the more these streaming services have things about Jews and other cultures that are hated and other religions that are hated, the more education they can put into mainstream TV or streaming services, everyone watches that stuff. Good, bad, evil. Everyone watches it. And if that's the slightest piece we can give them of Judaism or what happened that day and how that woman felt. I also told me there's another show called Friends and Neighbors. I don't know if you've watched that with John Hamm, but someone said, I haven't seen the second season, someone said they had a beautiful Pesach dinner. on the second season. So I think the more we can get mainstream people and the young adults out there and children, the better off we are going to be, just to share with them how great our traditions are and how similar they are to other religions. I have a friend that's Greek, same type of thing. They have the big family dinners. So I just think that helps. But I really loved how they depicted it in the pit.
What I heard him say was that, I mean, it wasn't that it was named after a specific Rabinowitz, but that they wanted the character to have a Jewish name.
Yes. And I think it's important in there for Noah Wiley, that he does depict a Jewish doctor, and the hospital that they're depicting, I believe, is, Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, is Allegheny General Hospital.
Yeah, it's AGH who's been working with them. I will say, and I have not watched it. I basically know what happens, but the families were not notified ahead of time, so it was a few of us were caught off guard, and Mary, who is Dr. Rabinowitz's wife, who I actually just had dinner with last week, she was unaware of it. Nobody was upset. It's just moments like that catch you off guard. But I agree with Diane. It portrays our religion, and it portrays our good side, and it portrays people getting along well together.
Yeah, I do agree. They should have notified the Tree of Life that was going to air, just so they could notify the families, because there are a lot of families that are still very sensitive to the material being out there. I mean, the truth of it is it's public domain. Right. So the families don't control it, but it would have been nice to get a heads up. But I was really pleased that he did it in such a beautiful way.
It was, yeah, I agree. I think it's very respectful.
Before you hang up, can I just let my dad give parting words? Because he gets mad at my sister and I that we shush him. So I said he could talk for a little bit.
The floor is yours.
At 94 years old, I think I've been reversed back to childhood. But we always referred to, and also the community referred to my Cecil and David as the boys. And they'll always be remembered by that term, Cecil and David, the boys. And we just want the community not to forget who they were. They were part of the Jewish community and respected for that. Diane and Paul, I thank you for making this presentation possible.
And I'll share with you, I don't know if I should, but I will share with you a picture that was done before my mom passed away, of our parents, with a picture of my brothers.
Lovely.
Very lovely. Yes.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Very lovely.
Yeah. My mom and one more thing, and then we'll let you guys go.
Sure.
My mom and dad, during the late 50s, early 60s, when my older brother was born, and then I was born in 61, and my younger brother was born in 64. Is that right, Dad?
Right.
64. And then Michelle was born in 69. But my parents worked religiously hard on making sure that the boys were mainstreamed and that they got the education that they could at their mental level, at their level, and that they were integrated into the population. So they'd walk around the community, and everyone knew who they were. And it was really important that to my parents that they were brought up in the home, because when the boys were younger, all the doctors suggested that they institutionalize my brothers, and my mom and dad said, absolutely not. They're part of our family. They'll grow up with our girls, and they'll be a part of the community, and they were. So, and we kind of chuckle now. I know this sounds morbid, but when People magazine had a picture of them on the front of the magazine, Michelle and I kind of chuckled with my mom and dad that Cecil would be like, oh my God, look, I'm on the cover of People magazine. Just because they just loved people, and they loved being out there. Michelle, anything you want to add?
No, I just appreciate you letting us jump on. I'm gonna get Dad ready for bed.
Okay.
And hopefully one day we'll get to Hawaii.
Yes.
Well,
Thank you
We
so
hope so.
much.
thank you so much for taking part. I really think, as powerful a job as the documentary does, I think that the comments that you've had and the insight that you've given us really makes we're part of the family now, and we feel that, and so thank you so much for being with us and for making this happen.
Anytime. And Alan, you have my email address and my phone. So if anyone has any other questions, but let people know the documentary's out there. It's on HBO Max, and they can pull it from there. I think it's still on HBO Max. I'll have to ask Trish, but if not, we can always get a showing. And I will check on the traveling exhibit, Alan, for you with the Tree of Life and see if there's something that we could do.
That would be wonderful. There are several congregations that would probably, we could get everybody to come together and have it at a location where people could, from the different congregations, would be able to share it. So I think that would
And
be,
that's the key, is finding a central place for it.
yeah. All right. Well, it gives us a job to do, but
Okay.
we'll work on that. So
Thank you all so
thank-
much for taking the
thanks.
time.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Aloha and shalom.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Thank you, Alan.